get started.
Give everyone a second to click on OK. All right, before we begin, I want to make sure everyone can access interpretation and closed captioning if you need it. We have closed captioning available in English. To access that, you can click on closed caption or CC at the bottom of your screen. We also have Spanish interpretation available. You can access that by clicking on interpretation on your control panel and selecting Spanish. Pueden acceder a español haciendo clic en interpretation en la parte inferior de la pantalla y escogiendo Spanish. Right now, we are not allowing participants to unmute themselves, but we possibly will later in the program during questions. So if you are joining on your computer, you can do that by clicking on the microphone. And if you're joining by phone, you can use *6 to unmute and mute yourself. And just now, or if you just logged on, you should have received a notification saying that we're recording. You can avoid being on the recording by keeping your camera off and by not speaking. And this event will be available in the coming weeks at www.aclunc.org/bethechange. All right, I want to begin with a brief land acknowledgement. The region where the ACLU of Northern California does our work exists on the occupied territory of over 100 tribes. This land has been and continues to be stewarded by Indigenous people since time immemorial. The ACLU of Northern California is committed to working alongside Indigenous peoples and following their lead as they work to uphold the sovereignty, dignity, and identities of Indigenous people. I am joining you from the territory of Huichin, which is the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people in the area now known as Richmond, California. So I invite you to, in the chat, introduce yourself, let us know where you're joining from. You can go to native-land.ca, and one of my colleagues will pop that into the chat, or you can text 907-312-5085 with your location in order to learn on whose land you are living or working. Again, that number is 907-312-5085, and hopefully one of my colleagues can put that in the chat. Pro tip though, that's a Canadian-based line, so if you put CA, they'll think that you mean Canada, so type out California. Next slide, please. So my name is Ashley Morris. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the organizing director at the ACLU of Northern California. And I'll invite my colleague Luis to introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. Luis Ojeda, pronouns he, him, region organizing and program manager, joining from what is known as Fresno, Yokuts land.
And there are a number of other ACLU staff members who will be responding to questions in the chat. They, I believe, have all identified themselves as ACLU staff members in their name on Zoom. Colleagues, if you haven't done that, please do so. So they'll help answer questions in the chat, and you may be hearing from them over the course of this presentation. So we are going to cover 4 key areas today. The first one is Luis is going to talk a little bit about the June primary, voting rights, what you need to know in general about the upcoming June election. I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the district attorney in general and some key races that are important to pay attention to in this upcoming election cycle. And then Luis will talk about what you can do to take action and get involved in this upcoming election. And then we will have some time for questions. So Luis.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Great. So as Ashley mentioned, I'm going to be diving in by just giving a quick overview of the June primary election, just to make sure everyone has a sense of what we have in store coming up really soon. So the primary election is on Tuesday, June 7th. And so I know it might feel like we just had an election. There's been lots of elections happening. And so we really just wanted to make sure everyone has a sense of what to expect. And so as I mentioned, the last day to vote in the election is going to be Tuesday, June 7th. And as usual, polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on that day. But as you all may be familiar, if you've voted in the past, we do have a practice in California that was recently made permanent that extends the practice of sending voters, a ballot in the mail to everyone who's a registered voter. So this year, in early May, all registered voters will get a ballot in the mail and will be able to vote by returning the ballot by mail, placing it in a drop box, or returning it in person at a polling place or a county clerk's office. So again, while the election is happening on June 7th, your ballot will be coming in early May. And so, voting isn't just one day, it takes place over that about a month period. And then just to quickly note as well, here in California, we do have a really high usage of vote by mail. So in the June primary in 2020, 72% of voters actually used the vote by mail system or voted by mail. And then in the November election of that year, that number actually rose all the way up to 86%. So it's a pretty widely used system here in California. And so it's super exciting that all voters get a ballot in the mail. We don't need postage. It's super, super easy to be able to do that. Yes, and we'll go in a little bit through that question of our polling places only open for one day again. And that'll vary a little bit by county, but we'll talk more about it real shortly right now. And then another important thing to note as well is that while we do technically have a registration deadline that is 15 days prior to election day, California is one of those states that does allow same-day conditional registration as well, which makes it super easy to register to vote all the way up till June 7th and be able to cast a vote in the election. So really important if you're not registered to make sure to get registered, but also if you forget or for whatever reason aren't able to, you can do that all the way up until election day as well. And as I shared earlier, California does utilize vote by mail pretty extensively, but obviously we do have a lot of folks who prefer voting in person or who simply choose to vote in this manner. And so we do want to highlight that there are in-person voting options, but they will vary a bit county by county. But in the 28 counties in California that are implementing what's called the Voters' Choice Act, all voters will have in-person voting centers that are actually open for 10 days prior to election day. So in total, that's about 11 voting days. And so this is going to include weekends as well, which is a very big deal. Makes it really much more accessible for people to be able to vote. So generally, these counties do usually have less polling locations available, but they are open longer, and voters are able to visit any of the vote centers in their county, regardless of where they live. So here you can see in this map, we have highlighted some of the counties that are already planning on utilizing this Voters' Choice Act system. And so a lot of those counties are in the Northern California region. And so we really do want to just encourage everyone to take a look at your county clerk's website to get more information about how your local county is running their elections. 11 counties are actually utilizing this system for the very first time, but in total, it's about 28 of the 58 counties that are utilizing it. So again, really exciting, really opens up the number of options for voting and really makes it a lot easier for people to vote. Next, we're going to just go really quickly over who can vote in this election. So we know that there are these general rules that are on the screen for folks to see. But according to the California Secretary of State's website, almost 82% of eligible voters in the state are registered to vote. But that does mean that about 5 million eligible Californians have not yet registered to vote. So there are still a lot of people who aren't registered. And so we really just want to give folks a reminder of some of these rules if you know anybody who's not registered who is perhaps eligible. So in order to vote, you must be a US citizen and be at least 18 years or older by the June 7th election. The only exception is in San Francisco, which does allow non-citizens to vote in only school board elections. But otherwise, these rules apply across the state. Additionally, anyone not currently serving a state or federal prison term for the conviction of a felony are also allowed to vote. And then following, and we wanted to note that following the historic passage of Prop 17 in 2020, the right to vote for people on parole was also recently restored. So big shout out to anyone who was involved in that campaign in that effort to make that happen. It's super exciting. And again, lots of folks maybe have questions about that. And so it's really important for folks to talk about how the right to vote is being expanded, and it's including folks who in the past weren't included. And then another restriction that we also have here in California is that the right to vote also includes anyone, the right to vote is restricted to exclude folks who are found mentally incompetent by a court. And then lastly, I also did want to note that California does allow pre-registration, excuse me. So this means that folks who are 16 and 17 years old are actually allowed to vote, to pre-register, excuse me, and then be able to vote once they turn 18. So again, the state of California, as opposed to other states across the country that are implementing different rules and making it much harder to vote, there is actually a lot of effort that has been done recently to make it much easier for people to vote. So again, make sure that if you're eligible, or if you know anybody who is eligible, to review the rules and get registered, because there are about 5 million Californians who still have not registered. Next, we want to talk about what's on the ballot. So we know that oftentimes November elections are the races that get a lot of attention, and a lot of people pay attention to those. And oftentimes it's limited to presidential elections. But this year on the ballot, we have a ton of important things that are on the ballot that we want to make sure to highlight for everyone to make sure that you are paying attention to this really important election that's happening again on June 7th. So at the federal level, we do want to highlight that 1/3 of all senators are up for re-election. And this does include one of our California senators, Alex Padilla. And then additionally, all members of the House are also up for re-election. And so those seats are all up as well. And as you may remember, following the 2020 census, California actually lost one House seat. And so now instead of the 53 that we previously had, we now have 52 seats. And then related, through the redistricting process, as hopefully everyone was paying attention to that, all of the new maps that were finalized in December are now going to be used for this upcoming June election. And so just make sure that you get familiar with those new maps and you take a look at how those may have shifted. For example, I used to be in District 16, but now I am going to be in District 21. And so again, make sure to get familiar with those new maps, as again, they will be used for several of these, for all these House races, and then also for the state assembly, and then some of your local races as well. Additionally, from all those important races at the federal level, there's also a lot of offices at the state level that are also up on the election. And so, as we know, last September there was the recall vote for governor, and so this is actually going to be on the ballot again. So everyone's going to be voting again for governor, but additionally, we also have lieutenant governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, controller, superintendent of public instruction, state board of equalization, insurance commissioner, and then also even numbered state senate districts, as well as all of the assembly districts. And so again, at the state level, there is a ton of different offices that are up for election. And so it's really, really important for everyone to get informed and pay attention to all of these super important races. And then additionally, I also just want to note, obviously, once Joe Biden was elected to the presidency and Kamala Harris became vice president, that then meant that there was sort of a reshuffling of different races. And so that's how Alex Padilla ended up in the Senate. And then also Rob Bonta, who was formerly in the assembly, then became attorney general. And so again, just make sure that you're paying attention to all these different shifts and who's in what office, and you pay attention to all the different things that are going to be on your ballot. And then I also did want to note that here in California, we do have a top 2 runoff system. So this does apply for these federal and state races. And it essentially means that everyone who's running for the different offices, the top 2 voters in June, then go off and compete against each other in November. And so, for example, in governor, there may be 20 folks who are running for that office. The top 2, regardless of party, will then face off in November for voters to choose the winner there. This system does not apply to local races. And so as we're going to be talking about races like the district attorney, those races actually can be decided in the June primary. And so again, it's really important for folks not to just skip this June primary and think that the final decisions are going to be made in November. It's actually a fact that some of these races will be decided in June as well. So with that, some of the local races, and these aren't all of them, these are just some of them, include district attorney, which again, we're going to be diving into a little bit more deeply, but also your sheriff. And so that's an office that's up for re-election. Some of your boards of supervisors are also up, as well as your members of your city council, and then also other local offices and local ballot measures. So all that to say is this is going to be a very long ballot, and there's a ton of offices that are up for re-election or that are going to be included in this election. So again, just want to make sure to highlight these and to make sure to stress the importance of these races, as again, it is going to be a lot of them. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, who's going to dive into some of the DA stuff for us to talk about.
Thank you. I realized that we didn't do our first poll question. Emily, can you do question number 1, please? And I think it's not going to show it to me because I'm a co-host. So Emily, can you read it to us also, please?
Yes, I just launched it. The first question is, do you know who your district attorney is?
So we'll give everyone a little bit of time to answer this question. Emily, can you keep us posted on what percentage we're at? Or if it's like slowing down?
Yep, we're at 61 people, almost there.
5 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
And I also can't see when you share the results. So can you tell me what that says?
Yeah, so I'm showing the results right now. Around 80% of people say yes and 20% say no.
Okay.
But nobody said my what now.
Okay, good start. Good start. All right. If you know who your DA is, I would love for you to tell us in the chat, remind us what county you're from and who your district attorney is. And we're going to dive in on a couple of key races. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the power of the district attorney. District attorneys are elected officials. That's one important thing to note. And they are very powerful elected officials. Each county in California has one of them, and they're elected to 4-year terms. This year, 56 out of 58 counties are holding their regularly scheduled district attorney elections. And in addition to that, there is a recall election being held to attempt to remove San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin from office. So 56 regularly scheduled elections plus the Chesa Boudin election. The only county that isn't dealing with a district attorney on their ballot this year is LA. And that is unless a recall of the LA district attorney ends up qualifying for the fall, but hopefully that doesn't happen. District attorneys in California have really tremendous power to impact the lives of millions of people, of our families, of our entire communities. If someone's accused of committing a crime, it's not the police, but rather it's the DA who has the power to decide if criminal charges are filed and what the severity of those charges should be. The district attorney's office decides basically who deserves a jail or prison sentence and who will instead be routed into a diversion program. Of course, then we potentially go to trial or the DA will attempt to get a plea, but really the DA's charging decisions have a huge impact on where people end up within the criminal legal system. The district attorney's office is responsible for investigating and prosecuting or deciding not to prosecute crimes within their county that are brought to them by law enforcement agencies like the police department or the sheriff's department. And the district attorney themselves is considered the chief prosecutor, and they oversee sometimes hundreds of employees within the district attorney's office, obviously depending on the size of the county and the budget of the DA's office. DAs are supposed to serve the interests of the people who live in their county. They're public servants who not only work in courtrooms, but they also affect your day-to-day life by, for example, supporting or opposing statewide policies, both ballot measures and legislation, and also making decisions about how to spend taxpayer dollars in the criminal legal system in your county. Next slide, please. The California District Attorneys Association is the association that purports to be a voice for district attorneys in the state. In practice, the association tends to oppose really important and broadly supported criminal justice reforms. Because of the association's power and influence, even some kind of reform-minded prosecutors have been hesitant to speak out in favor of reforms and against the positions of the association. The association has opposed ballot measures to reduce penalties for drug offenses, to legalize cannabis. They've opposed efforts to reform the 3 strikes law that's contributed to mass incarceration in California, and they've resisted efforts to restrict the prosecution of minors as adults. However, recently, an organization was formed called the Prosecutors Alliance of California. This is an alliance that supports and amplifies the voices of California prosecutors who are committed to reforming our criminal justice system through safe, smart, modern solutions that advance not just public safety, but also community well-being. The voices of these prosecutors are often drowned out by the traditional law enforcement organizations that oppose reform, like the California District Attorneys Association. I want to highlight the advisory committee members for the Prosecutors Alliance. They include Contra Costa District Attorney, my district attorney, Diana Becton, San Joaquin County DA, Tori Verber Salazar, who also very publicly left the California District Attorneys Association a couple years ago, Los Angeles District Attorney, George Gascon, who's also reform-minded, and I also believe is not a member of the District Attorneys Association, and San Francisco DA, Chesa Boudin. So before we move into key races, let's do our next poll question. Emily, help us out.
All right.
Emily, can you read out the answers on this one, or the options on this one as well, please?
Yeah, so this is, over which of these areas do DAs have major influence? Whether police are held accountable for misconduct, diverting people into rehabilitation and services, charging immigration offenses that can lead to potential immigration consequences, including deportation, pushing young people into the system or diverting them into second chance programs. All of the above or none of the above?
Give you a few seconds to answer.
36% participated.
And
oh, the poll ended. Okay. That's strange.
oh, we lost it. Okay, well, I'm sure you are all going to say all of the above, which is the answer. District attorneys have a lot of power over a lot of areas of the law. They have a lot of discretion, and it's really important that we elect the right people to these offices. So let's dive in on a few key races. But first, what we've learned over the past several years of engaging in district attorney races is that perhaps the most important part of the race is actually the part before the race even begins, and that's the candidate recruitment phase. District attorneys often run unopposed. There have been an increasing number of contested elections in recent years, but there's still a majority of counties where the sitting district attorney runs again and again every election without any challenger. This limits our ability to hold them accountable when they don't act in the interests of our communities, because there's no threat of them losing their seat when nobody's challenging them. We've also seen many cases over the years where a sitting district attorney retires prior to the election, maybe just a few months before. They handpick their interim successor, who is then appointed by the County Board of Supervisors. And then that person is able to run as an incumbent in the next election with the advantage of the incumbency, which can have a lot of power when people aren't well informed about the candidates. They see that person on the ballot whose role was already district attorney, and they assume that person knows the job, I'm just going to vote for them. So candidate recruitment can be challenging for this prosecutor role, because a lot of reform-minded attorneys pursue careers as public defenders, or they practice civil rights law. But we are seeing more and more public defenders who are making the transition to the prosecutor role to be able to bring their perspectives and experiences as public defenders to the table in the role of district attorney. One example of this is the current San Francisco district attorney, Chesa Boudin. And then there's a candidate for the Santa Clara district attorney, Sajid Khan, who's been working as a public defender, among others in the field, I'm sure. That's certainly not to say that only those with experience as public defenders can come to become reform-minded prosecutors. More progressive reform-minded attorneys are now entering district attorney offices at the early stages of their careers, now that it's kind of become more of a norm that there are progressive district attorneys, there are district attorneys' offices that are focused on reform-minded policies and not just on getting convictions. So it's just really important that early on in people's careers, people who are reform-minded, who are progressive, are taking roles in district attorneys' offices, or those who have backgrounds in other areas of the law are running for district attorney, to make sure that that field continues to diversify in terms of experiences. As I said earlier, district attorneys are elected to 4-year terms, and 56 out of 58 counties have their elections this year. The 2 counties that do not have regularly scheduled elections, as I mentioned, are Los Angeles and San Francisco. However, the progressive San Francisco district attorney, former public defender, Chesa Boudin, is facing recall this year for implementing the very reform-minded policies he was elected for. And there have been a number of efforts to attempt to qualify a recall of LA District Attorney George Gascon. So I suppose that is still a possibility for the November ballot. The primary election, as Luis mentioned earlier, is particularly important in district attorney races, because if any candidate gets over 50% of the vote in the primary, then they are elected in the primary, and they don't have to face an election in the November general. Because most races are not contested, as I said earlier, and those that are contested often only have 2 candidates, most district attorney races are actually decided in the primary, with one of the candidates getting over 50% of the vote, or in the case of someone without a challenger, probably close to 100% of the vote, or I guess definitely 100% of the people who actually vote in that race. Turnout is also lower in primary elections than in general elections, which just means that fewer people vote in DA elections than in other races. But we want to change that, and that's why we are here talking to you today. So there's 4 key races that we're going to focus on in our work engaging voters in the district attorney race. If your county isn't on this list, it doesn't mean it's not important. These are just counties where we know that there is someone reform-minded running. So those are Sacramento, Contra Costa, Santa Clara, and Yolo counties. I'll also put Alameda sort of in that bucket. I'm going to talk about Alameda in a second, but that one is likely to not be decided until November because there are 4 people running. So we'll probably pay more attention to that one after the primary. Just so you know, there are 17 total contested races in the state. The other races that are contested are Orange, Riverside, Ventura, Humboldt, Stanislaus, Imperial, Solano, Merced, Monterey, and Lake counties. The filing deadline isn't until like March 11th-ish, so more people could file for this election still, but so far those are the ones that we're aware of. In Alameda, Sacramento, Humboldt, Stanislaus, and Imperial counties, there's an open seat, so there's no incumbent running. I just want to give one brief example of why contested races are so important. I mentioned that my district attorney is Diana Becton here in Contra Costa County, but until last summer, I lived in Alameda County in Oakland. And in the last district attorney, and I lived in Alameda County for been a registered voter for 18, 19 years in Alameda County. And I had never gotten any mailers that I can recall or really been targeted by text bankers, phone bankers, or anything related to a district attorney election in Alameda County. Nancy O'Malley was the incumbent district attorney. She was challenged by Pamela Price in that race, and the amount of mail, and I'm not saying that the amount of mail is necessarily a good thing, but the amount of mail that I got as a voter in Alameda County in that race in the last election was remarkable. And I could really see that Nancy O'Malley, who was the incumbent, was trying to market herself as a progressive, knowing that her challenger was a progressive candidate. And it totally changed the narrative around the race. And it changed the effort that the candidates had to put in to try to get elected. Ultimately, Nancy O'Malley was reelected, but it forced her to come out and make certain policy positions public during the race that then she could be held accountable for. So it was really important, and it really changed the way I engaged with that race as a voter, just by the fact that there was a challenger to that incumbent in that race. Okay, so let's quickly go through a few of these races that we are paying close attention to. And just a note that we haven't said yet, which is that the ACLU does not endorse candidates for elected office. So we will give you lots of information about these candidates to help you make an informed decision and help your friends and family make informed decisions about the race in your county, but we're not going to tell you who to vote for. We can take positions on recalls, so more to come on that San Francisco recall from us, but as far as any of these other races go, we're not going to tell you who to vote for. So the incumbent district attorney in Sacramento County is Anne Marie Schubert, and she is not reform-minded, I would say, and she's running for attorney general. So this is an open seat. The candidates are Tin Ho and Alana Matthews. So that's who's running in Sacramento, and that's an exciting race that is important to watch. Jeff Reisig is the district attorney in Yolo County, and he's being challenged by Cynthia Rodriguez. Jeff Reisig is also the president of the California District Attorneys Association, which I talked about earlier. And I'll note that in the last election in 2018 in Yolo County, a public defender actually came very close to winning that race. So that's possible in Yolo County. In Alameda County, as I said, we're not going to be doing a ton on this race leading up to the primary, but more to come in the general. There are 4 candidates who are running. Pamela Price, who ran last time, Seth Stewart, Terry Wiley, and Jimmy Wilson. And the incumbent district attorney, Nancy O'Malley, is not running for re-election, so this is also an open seat. In Santa Clara County, Jeff Rosen is the incumbent. Sajid Khan is the public defender that I mentioned earlier, who's challenging him. And then the other candidate is Daniel Chung. Are we on the Santa Clara slide? Let me move to the Santa Clara slide, please. And I'll just note that the Santa Clara District Attorney's Office is the largest in Northern and Central California, and I believe the largest north of Los Angeles. Possibly that means it's the second largest in the state, with over 600 employees and almost 200 deputy district attorneys. So 200 lawyers alone or actual prosecutors alone in the Santa Clara District Attorney's Office. So that is a massive operation. So it's important to have good management skills, no matter which county you're the district attorney of, but in big counties like Santa Clara, that's a really critical role for the district attorney to play as well, beyond just being a prosecutor. All right, a few quick notes on the San Francisco recall. San Francisco, sorry, my doorbell's ringing. San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin was elected in 2019 under some very reform-minded policies. He is facing recall. The recall is being funded by conservative interests, but it's being marketed as sort of a moderate reform kind of thing. But to be clear, Chesa Boudin is doing the things that he said he would do as district attorney and upon which the voters of San Francisco chose to elect him. Overall, there's a pretty tense political landscape happening in San Francisco. We won't get into that too much, but again, there's going to be more to come for those of you who do live in San Francisco, specifically about this race. If DA Boudin is recalled, Mayor London Breed will be able to appoint an interim district attorney until the 2023 election. That's next year. This is a little different than the recall of Governor Newsom, where it was, should we recall Governor Newsom? And then you also had the chance to vote for the potential replacement. That's not the case with the San Francisco recalls. So both with the school board recalls that just happened in February in San Francisco and with the district attorney recall, if the district attorney is recalled, we don't get to vote for the replacement. The mayor gets to appoint the replacement. And as I've alluded to or said explicitly multiple times, there have been a number of attempts to qualify a recall of the progressive Los Angeles District Attorney, George Gascon, that have so far failed to qualify for the ballot, but those attempts persist. So I'm gonna hand it over to Luis to tell you how you can take action. And then after that, we'll take questions.
Thank you, Ashley. So yes, we're going to be talking about how to take action. So as Ashley highlighted, there's lots and lots of important district attorney elections in lots of key counties, but also there's obviously a lot of other things that are going to be on the ballot. So the first thing that we want to make sure to highlight and to encourage everyone to do, regardless of where you are in the state, is to make a voting plan and vote in this important election. As we noted before, oftentimes the primary elections are skipped. For whatever reason, folks don't vote in this election. And so, there's usually a lower turnout. And so we really just want to encourage everyone to make sure you start thinking about your voting plan and start thinking about who you're going to talk to about the election as well. Additionally, we want to make sure to just flag to stay tuned for the relaunch of a website called voteforda.org, where we're going to be hosting information about the various district attorneys in the various counties. So you'll be able to take a look at the responses from different candidates on a variety of important issues. And we may also need your help if there are any district attorneys who don't respond to our request to fill out the questionnaire or survey. You can definitely help us pressure them and ensure that we get as many of the candidates to respond and to give us information about where they stand on a variety of important issues that they are going to be overseeing potentially. And then secondly, we also want to invite everybody to participate in helping us reach voters in some of the key counties that we mentioned earlier. And so as you all know, the only way to ensure that we have strong turnout is to talk to as many voters as possible. So the ACLU is going to be leading different text and phone banks to voters in some of these priority or key races. And so we really want to encourage everybody to sign up and get involved. And you can sign up at the link that's in the chat. And so we really encourage you all to join us as much as you can, help us reach those voters. Those conversations that we have with folks on the phone are going to be critical to ensure that the turnout is high and that they are informed voters going into the election. And here there's also just a quick preview of the schedule that we have on deck. And so we're going to be launching with text banking starting Tuesday, March 1st. And then there's going to be additional dates. And so you can see those additional dates in the link that's going to be in a launch soon, excuse me. And so make sure that you join us. We would love to have you participate in as many of these as possible. Again, there are thousands of voters to reach. And so the more support we have, the better. So we really want to encourage everybody to make sure to participate. And we have a question in the chat about canvassing. Obviously, the pandemic has thrown a lot of wrenches into a lot of plans. And so at the moment, we don't have any canvassing planned, but we'll see how things change in the coming months. And then additionally, we also did want to flag that we do have our ACLU California Action Conference, which will be virtual as well. And this is happening April 19th to the 29th. So we'll make sure to send additional information about that event, but just wanted to flag for folks who are interested in participating. And so now we'll close off to see if there are any questions that folks may have.
We have a poll question first.
Great, let's launch that poll. And Emily, if you could help us with that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, just launched it. So what are you going to do to help get out the vote? Text bank, phone bank, host a candidate forum, talk to friends, family, and neighbors about the local race, or something else? Tell us in the chat. All right, we got around 50%. A lot of talking to friends and family. Text banking.
And did we drop the text bank registration link in the chat? Let's do that now.
Yes, it is in the chat there.
Paste it again.
Perfect. And Emily, is the poll still open?
Yeah, we have around 70% participated. Just get those last few votes in, and then I'll end the poll.
Right. Last call. Another important election. You all can practice. Come on now.
Okay. So it looks like 45% of folks want to text bank. So that's great. 20% would like to phone bank. 27% are interested in hosting a candidate forum. 84% will be talking to friends, family, neighbors, and 20% of others will be doing something else.
Great. So if you are on this webinar, we have your email address and we're going to follow up with you. But anyone who said that they are going to text or phone bank, I encourage you to click on the link right now and sign up for your first text or phone banks. And you'll notice that for the first, like March, April, we'll be text banking, and then we're going to transition into phone banking. And I just want to say, I know that a lot of us are uncomfortable with phone banking and we've gotten in the habit of text banking, but we're going to make calls and it's going to feel really good. And I promise you it'll be fun. And even if someone's mean to you, it'll be okay. So please join us for phone banks. All right.
Great. And yes, we did have a question in the chat about, will the text phone banks be specific to certain counties? And yes, they will. They will be targeting some of the key races that we mentioned. So definitely stay tuned for that. But as Ashley said, that phone banking can be really persuasive and really effective. Oftentimes, for those who have texted, some people will get a text but then ignore it. And so being able to speak to people and have a conversation can be really powerful. Great. So we're going to move to this last slide, which is any questions. So we do have one that says, I guess it's a comment. You didn't go over the race in Contra Costa.
Oh my gosh. I left that off the thing. I'm sorry. So Contra Costa District Attorney Diana Becton is running for re-election. And I believe the challenger's name is Mary Knox. Is that right? Yoel, do you know the answer to this? So sorry.
Yes, it's Mary Knox.
I'm not sure how I managed that.
Yes, and as we mentioned, right, there are at least 17, maybe more competitive races, and so there are other races that we also didn't highlight.
So Raquel and Carlos, you've been tracking some of the questions in the chat. So maybe, I know that there've been a lot, so maybe you could highlight any themes or questions that people have asked multiple times to start.
Sure. One question that has been coming up a couple times is, are people going to get a copy of the recording and slides?
It's a big file to send out the slides. So if you want the slides, you can email changemakers@aclunc.org. That's the email address on the screen, and we'll send you the slides. And within the next, I don't know, week or two, we should have the recording up at aclunc.org/be-the-change, and I'll type that to chat.
Awesome.
But I will send a follow-up email that has that link. So yeah.
Thank you. Someone had also asked if polling locations are going to be open for one day again.
Luis, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So as I shared in the some of the initial slides, in-person voting does look a little bit different county by county. And so we just want to encourage folks to make sure to take a look at their county clerk's website from your county. As I mentioned, those counties that implement the Voters' Choice Act do have a little bit more extensive in-person voting options where they are open on weekends prior to election day. Additionally, all county clerk's offices are essentially polling locations that are usually open 28 days before an election. So you can also go in there, even starting in May, and to vote in person. So again, make sure to look up the specific details for your county, as in-person voting does look a little bit different county by county. But a reminder that everybody who's registered will get a ballot in the mail. And so that one is obviously an easy route to take as well.
Awesome. Thank you. We had a couple questions coming up around sheriff races and folks wondering if we're going to touch on that.
Sheriff's races are also really important. We think it's challenging to find good reform-minded people to run for a district attorney. It's even more challenging to find those types of people to run for sheriff. So you should definitely learn who the candidates are in your sheriff's race. I think our bigger focus this year will be on district attorney races, but sheriffs have a lot of power in running the jail in your county and other things, determining what degree of cooperation or non-cooperation the county has with ICE. Yoel, is there anything you want to add about sheriffs? Our colleague Yoel has joined us. Yoel is our criminal justice director, and
Nothing to add on sheriffs.
thanks.
But that's a great question that just highlights again all of the different offices that are up for election. There's so many of them, so really encourage everyone to do research on the various offices.
I've seen a couple of questions about San Mateo County in the chat, so I'll just speak to that briefly. I don't know if anyone from the North Peninsula chapter of the ACLU is on this webinar right now, but if you are, or Tammy, if there's anything that you want to say about how someone can get involved with the chapter's work around the district attorney race in, well, lack of a race, but the district attorney accountability work in San Mateo County, please feel free to say that in the chat. I know that our chapter and a coalition of other organizations has been doing a lot of work to hold DAWAD staff in San Mateo County accountable to the question of how to find a progressive candidate to run. I don't really know the answer to that, but yeah, anyone from San Mateo County who wants to connect with each other separately over the chat, please feel free to do that.
And then also there's the question regarding the text/phone banks, if they're going to be specific to certain counties.
So we will be texting in Sacramento, Contra Costa, Santa Clara, and Yolo. We will also do some texting around the San Francisco district attorney race. I haven't totally figured out if each text bank will be specifically dedicated to one county at a time, but those are the counties that we will be covering over the course of the program. If we decide to focus a specific text bank on a specific county, we'll probably update the registration form to indicate that, but yeah, that's the plan. Those are the places where we will be texting and phone banking into. Raquel or Carlos, anything else?
We did.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was saying we did get a bunch of questions that just came in that maybe we can go through. What are the qualifications for DA, and is there any action for AG?
I believe the qualification is that you have to be a lawyer. This again might be a good question for you all to weigh in on. He's still on.
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be a licensed attorney with the California bar, but I think that's the bare minimum requirement. Obviously, I think to run the DA's office, people expect you to have experience in criminal law, either as a defense attorney, prosecutor, or other. But in terms of like what is the bare requirement, you just have to be like a licensed attorney in California.
Thank you.
And I think the second part of the question was, is there any action for AG?
What do you, Beverly, I'm not sure what you mean by that. The Attorney General race is an important one to pay attention to. The Attorney General Rob Bonta is being challenged by soon to be former Sacramento District Attorney Anne Marie Schubert. Raquel, Carlos, any other questions that you can pull out for us?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of San Mateo County references. Just if the ACLU has like any suggestions on how to get, I guess, more progressive candidates to hop on board.
Yeah, I talked about that one a little bit, and I think Tammy can try to connect. Tammy put her email address in the chat. Tammy, maybe you can pop that in there one more time. If you want to get connected with the North Peninsula chapter in San Mateo County, which is our ACLU chapter there, that's working with a number of partners around district attorney accountability in San Mateo County, you can connect with Tammy at tkresnar@aclunc.org, and she just popped that back into the chat. Any burning questions that we haven't answered? The chat's just been going really quickly, so it's hard for us to track the chat and also respond to your very good questions.
Sandy said, if we have a group that wants to text bank into Alameda County, could you help us set that up?
Potentially. It depends on what you're going to be saying. We have to make sure that it remains nonpartisan and non-endorsement, but you can email changemakers@aclunc.org and we can work with you on that. Any last burning questions before we wrap up? So changemakers@aclunc.org, I just put it in the chat and it's also on the screen. You should expect an email in the next couple of days coming from Changemakers with a recap of some of the things that we highlighted in this conversation, and the links that we've shared with you in the chat. And you can reply to that email if you want us to give you a copy of the slides. And I think that's it. Luis, anything else? Oh, Luis has just reminded us of the link to sign up for text and phone banks. So please, please, please do that. And we'll look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.